After the legendary reign of Queen Dido, a woman immortalized in myth and admired in memory, Carthage did not fade into silence. The city she founded endured, growing from a Phoenician trading outpost into a thriving maritime hub. The early years remained shrouded in silence, but by the 6th century BC, a new force began to emerge, a family that would seize the reins of Carthage's rising ambitions, the Magonids. This was not a kingdom like Rome, where kings ruled by decree and conquest. Carthage was an oligarchic republic, where families vied for power behind closed council doors. The Magonids didn't need a crown. They had ships, gold, and charisma, and they had Mago. Mago, the dynasty's patriarch, is first recorded in the mid-6th century BC. Though the details are, lost to time, his legacy echoes in the bones of Carthaginian history. Mago wasn't just a wealthy merchant. He was a strategist who saw Carthage's destiny not in the Levant but across the sea. Under Mago, Carthage expanded its influence across the western Mediterranean. Colonies in Sardinia, western Sicily, and the North African coast fell under Carthaginian influence, not through massed armies but by dominating trade routes and forming strategic alliances. But Mago understood that profit required protection. He professionalized Carthage's military, separating it from the aristocratic militias common in other states. Mercenaries drawn from Libya, Numidia, and Iberia became the backbone of a new Carthaginian war machine, flexible, expendable, and, loyal only to gold. As the city expanded, so did the Magonid influence. But unlike the hereditary monarchies of the East, Carthage's rulers had to operate within a delicate political balance. The Council of Elders, comprised of Carthage's wealthiest families, remained the true seat of power. Mago and his descendants ruled with the council's approval, not over it. This dynamic, forced the Magonids to act more like CEOs than kings. They really had to keep the trade flowing, the mercenaries paid, and the aristocrats enriched. Their legitimacy came from results, not from lineage. It worked. Carthage grew rich and powerful. Trade networks, they spanned from Spain to Egypt. Silver and tin flowed into Carthaginian coffers. The navy expanded, fast, sleek ships that outpaced pirates and rival fleets alike. But as you might expect, success breeds enemies. And in Sicily, Carthage's expansion brought it face to face with an ancient and implacable rival, the Greeks. By the early 5th century BC, Carthage was a dominant naval power, but the island of Sicily was a battleground. The Greeks had long colonized parts of the island, founding cities like Syracuse, Agrigentum, and Selinus. The Magonid kings, especially Mago's sons and grandsons, sought to expand Carthaginian control over the western part of the island, where Phoenician settlers had lived for centuries. Conflict was, pretty much inevitable. In 480 BC, a major clash occurred, the Battle of Himera. Hamilcar I, who was likely Mago's grandson, led a massive Carthaginian expedition against the Greek city-states of Sicily. The reasons for this campaign were political, economic, and honestly, deeply personal. Syracuse and Agrigentum had both challenged Carthage's trade interests and supported anti-Carthaginian forces in western Sicily. Hamilcar landed with a vast army including mercenaries from Iberia, North Africa, and even Gaul, but the Greeks, led by Gelon of Syracuse, decisively defeated the Carthaginians. Hamilcar was killed, possibly burned alive during a sacrificial ritual after the battle. It was a stunning defeat, and it changed everything. The loss at Himera, it really shocked Carthage. The city's pride was wounded, and honestly, there were a lot of questions raised about the Magonid leadership. But the dynasty endured, though its role definitely began to change. Carthage turned inward for a while, focusing on economic recovery and political restructuring. A new class of administrators started to rise, checking the power of the Magonids. The council, it gained more authority. The Suffetes, Carthage's dual chief magistrates, began to dominate day-to-day governance, slowly eroding that royal veneer the Magonids once held. Still, the family managed to retain its influence. Carthage's commercial empire kept expanding, with Iberian silver mines becoming absolutely critical to its wealth. New colonies and alliances secured vital grain and trade routes across Africa and even beyond. But beneath the surface tensions brewed. Greek Sicily was still a threat. Rome was a growing presence in Italy, and Carthage's reliance on mercenaries would one day prove to be both a weapon and a curse. Despite the humiliation at Himera, Carthage would not abandon Sicily. The island remained a vital node in its trade web, and a festering wound to its pride. In the late 5th century BCE, Carthage launched another invasion under Hannibal Mago, a descendant of the founder and perhaps one of the last towering figures of the dynasty. This time, vengeance was on the agenda. In 409 BCE, Hannibal captured and razed the Greek city of Selinus, then turned on Himera itself, the very site of Carthage's earlier disaster. There, he enacted a grim retribution. Himera was destroyed, its citizens slaughtered or enslaved. Bones buried in the dust of a previous defeat were now soaked in vengeance. But Sicily remained turbulent. In 405 BCE, another Magonid, Himilco, waged a campaign that reached the walls of Syracuse. For a moment, it seemed Carthage might subjugate the entire island. But plagues, supply issues, and fierce Greek resistance stalled the advance. A truce was signed, but it was a costly stalemate. These campaigns were Pyrrhic in more ways than one. Though Carthage demonstrated military might, the wars drained its treasury, strained its alliances, and sowed dissent back home. By the early 4th century BCE, the Magonids were no longer kings in name. Their power had grown too obvious, too threatening for the Republic's oligarchy. The council clipped their wings, removing formal powers and embedding checks on family influence. Carthage's government transformed into a complex constitutional system. 2 suffetes, or judges, led the state. A council of elders held legislative power, and a powerful tribunal of 104 judges ensured no individual could dominate. The Magonids adapted. They became generals, diplomats, and bankers, but the age of dynastic rule was over. The dynasty that once steered fleets and armies across the Mediterranean became a memory etched in coins and chronicles. Still, their legacy endured. The military institutions they built, the colonies they founded, and the enemies they made would shape Carthage's destiny for centuries. As Carthage's grip on Sicily waned, it turned westward. In Iberia, modern-day Spain, the city struck deep into the interior, tapping rich silver mines and founding outposts that would one day become the staging ground for its greatest general. Though the Magonids were fading from power, their imperial vision lived on. The commercial colonization of Iberia was perhaps their most lasting contribution. It funded the navy, paid for mercenaries, and stabilized Carthage after repeated Sicilian disasters. But this expansion sowed the seeds of a far greater conflict. Rome, a once insignificant city in central Italy, was now rising rapidly. The two powers had yet to clash, but they were on a collision course, fueled by trade, territory, and ideology. The exact fate of the Magonid family is unclear. Some died on campaign, others likely faded into the Carthaginian elite, absorbed by the bureaucratic machinery they once commanded. By the 3rd century BCE, Carthage was ruled by councils and influenced by families with no royal bloodline. But the memory of the Magonids loomed large. They were architects of empire, creators of systems, and symbols of Carthaginian pride. They proved that power could come from commerce, not conquest, and that a family could rule not from a palace but from a harbor. Their methods would inspire Carthage's most famous dynasty, the Barcids. In time, Carthage would burn. Roman legions would level the city to ash, and its name would be cursed in the Senate halls of the Republic. But the vision of the Magonid kings, the trading empire, the maritime dominance, the blend of mercantile cunning and military might, outlived the city's walls. Their story is not one of glory alone. It's a lesson in hubris, ambition, and adaptation. They bent the forces of empire to a city with no king and showed that, honestly, commerce could be as lethal as any legion. And though their dynasty would fall, their legacy endures in every ship that dared the western seas, in every coin struck with Carthaginian pride, and in every battle fought to defend a merchant empire on the edge of the world. The Magonids laid the foundation for Carthage's rise and its fall. Their vision shaped the city, but their ambition also made it a rival to Rome. Next, we turn to the family that inherited their legacy and waged war on the Republic, the Barcids. Subscribe as we follow the flame through history and witness the fire that consumed an empire.